Welcome to another edition of the DFS Report. Happy Tuesday to everybody. December the 3rd. Got a massive 10-game slate on our hands. Zach, a few minutes late, but we are here nonetheless. We're just busy people, you're writing articles. I got to put this 10-game slate together, so apologies for being a couple minutes late, but we made it. We have a really interesting slate on our hands tonight. We're going to dive right in, so we're not going to waste too much time here. Let's start with the goalies, as we always do. Logan Thompson gets to start for the Washington Capitals. It's going to be Mackenzie Blackwood for the San Jose Sharks. The Penguins will go with Tristan Jarry, who will look to continue to build on some strong performances recently. Spencer Knight gets to start for the Florida Panthers. Sergei Bobrovsky out due to personal reasons. Him and his wife or his lady are having a baby. Congratulations to the Bobrovskis. Sam Montembeault gets to start for the Montreal Canadiens, likely going to see Ilya Sorokin for the New York Islanders. Pyotr Kochetkov likely returning. Not confirmed. They said he's most likely going to be back after missing, I believe it was 4 games with a concussion. No confirmation on the Seattle Kraken goaltender. We got Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen likely to get the start for the Sabres up against Alexander Georgiev for the Colorado Avalanche. It's going to be Jonas Korpisalo for the Boston Bruins. Ville Husso gets the nod for the Detroit Red Wings. I was hoping we were going to see Sebastian Cossa with Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon both out, but like I've said before, Derek Lalonde does not want a job anymore, so let's just do the most boring thing you can do and throw it to goalie we know is not good anymore. Philip Gustafsson gets a start for the Minnesota Wild. Unconfirmed who gets the nod for the Canucks. It'll be Connor Hellebuck for the Winnipeg Jets. Joel Hofer from the Winnipeg area gets a start for the Blues in his hometown. Vladar gets the nod for the Calgary Flames. It'll be Elvis Merzlikins for the Blue Jackets. Aiden Hill starts for the Vegas Golden Knights against Stuart Skinner for the Edmonton Oilers. Listen to John and hit that like button for me and Zach. And if you're new, just found this new channel. Unfortunately, last week we didn't have time to kind of prepare you guys for this, but yes, obviously a new DFO fantasy and betting channel. So give us a subscribe as well so you never miss an episode with me and Zach. Zach, very exciting looking show. We've got your Edmonton Oilers and also your Calgary Flames on here. Are you ready to rock tonight?
I'm always ready to rock.
All right, here we go. We'll start with the San Jose Sharks and the Washington Capitals. Very interesting game here in this one. Really, really good matchups, as you might imagine, for the Washington Capitals. The second line, new look second line, has the number one matchup score on the slate. The top line's got a really, really good matchup as well. So Washington looks like they're in an outstanding spot tonight. If you didn't see their new look lines, they kind of loaded up that top line now with McMichael and Strome together, along with Tom Wilson leaving Protas, Dubois, and Radish on that second line. So with the number one matchup score overall, that second line seems interesting. I'm not buying in too much into these numbers because I had to kind of try to piecemeal some stats together here for them as best I could. I still think they're going to be pretty good. Overall, they grade out tremendously well, 10th best. I would knock them down a few spots at the very least, but nonetheless, they still grade out with the number one matchup score, regardless of what their actual numbers would look like in the future or will look like in the future. Number one matchup score overall at 9,100. They look like a really, really nice value option tonight. If you take a look at the raw projections, which doesn't factor any of that in, they still grade out as the third best line in terms of points per thousand. So they look like a really nice value option tonight. And it's a way to get off a little bit of the chalk of Washington won. Washington won by far and away the highest owned line on the slate at 15.7%. Thanks to our friends at rotogrinders.com for that. So very interested in this entire top six for the Capitals tonight. How about you?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting game here as a whole. I like the San Jose side of this game. I love the Washington side of this game. Obviously, Washington won. Look like they're in like the best spot here tonight on this slate, projecting for around 15% ownership, an absolute boatload coming their way, but understandably so. I mean, Connor McMichael's been on an absolute heater this year. Dylan Strome is setting up anybody and everybody to score goals, and Tom Wilson as well. I mean, he's still Tom Wilson. The second line here, it's a really interesting line to kind of look at because you look at these three players and it's like, well, where's the goals going to come from? Alexi Protas has been on a heater of all heaters to start this year. He's going to come crashing down to earth here too. Pierre-Luc Dubois, we're still waiting for him to get going offensively and start putting up some goals. None of these guys take a whole lot of shots on goal whatsoever. All three of them below 6 shots on goal per hour of ice time. I think that's a reason that I have some concern here with playing this second line. Obviously the line stats, the small sample looks fine. The matchup score is absolutely tremendous. They grade out well, 10th overall. I think it's going to be pretty easy for me to get 10% of them in my 20 max here tonight. And I think I'm willing to take that shot just in case they do score a goal or two here. But this top line of Washington one, man, I mean, they look like the absolute line to be on here tonight.
Yeah, chalk's been hitting pretty effectively lately too, and it's not like on a 10-game slate, you can't get different. So yeah, I definitely want to eat some of that chalk with Washington one tonight. Washington 2 seems like the perfect type of line to just take a dart throw on, and pair them with the super expensive lines, whether it's Minnesota 1, whether it's Colorado 1, Edmonton obviously on the slate as well. So yeah, at $9,000, you can't really go wrong. It's going to be interesting. Dubois, obviously a guy that's pretty good playmaker, could be setting up Protoss, could be setting up Radish tonight. Somebody's going to have to shoot the puck on this line with that number 1 matchup score. You mentioned the Sharks, being interested in them as well. Like, it's crazy, right? This offense has really come around. Back-to-back games against the Seattle Kraken, really, really good stuff. They've averaged 8.8, not goals for, but like there's been 8.8 goals scored per game between them and their opponents in their last 4 games. And you look on the Washington side of things, their last 3 games, 9 goals, and 11 goals. These two teams scoring a ton of goals, scoring a ton of goals, and then like giving up a ton of goals. So it's really, really interesting here. That San Jose side of things, like that Eklund, Celebrini, Zetterlund line has been super good in terms of like raw production, 5.3 goals per 60, but then the offensive metrics kind of lagging behind. So I don't know how much I'm really buying into this new look, high-powered offense of the San Jose Sharks, but Celebrini looks like an absolute dog. He looks really, really good. I think these numbers are going to continue to improve, but I don't know how much I'm willing to buy into them, as being unbelievably offensively talented, as we've seen in the most recent performances. But I do think I'm going to have a decent amount. They're not really seeing a whole lot of ownership at all, and based on at least the last couple of games from both of these squads, it does look like one that the goals can certainly be racked up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really interesting spot here for the Sharks. They've kept some of these high-scoring games fairly close, all things considering as well. And I kind of want to ride this heater that they're on right now. Macklin Celebrini, he has been awesome so far this season as a rookie. He's taking a lot of shots too, 9.7 shots on goal per hour of ice time, 1.5 goals per hour of ice time. Granted, he's only scoring 0.7 individual expected goals, so he's really capitalizing on the looks that he gets. But I think I want to kind of continue to try and ride this wave. It's a really interesting spot here because, as you mentioned, both of these teams have been giving up a lot defensively as well. We saw the Capitals kind of go on an absolute heater to come out and start the season here. And it feels like they've started to come down to earth a little bit here. You take a look at their defensive metrics, nothing really outstanding there beyond their third line, who's turning out to be a fairly solid shutdown line. I think this is a really interesting spot to try and get a little bit different too. Dare I say maybe a little bit of San Jose 3. They're seeing absolutely zero ownership on this slate tonight. Mikael Granlund, he has been great so far this season. Will Smith, Klim Kostin, I understand they're $2,500 players here, but they've put up some points in the last couple of games here. Smith is obviously a really talented player in his own right, who feels like he's starting to turn a corner here. Like, these 3 guys are literally projecting for under 1% ownership. So I don't mind like a little Mikael Granlund, Will Smith mini stack, try and get some exposure to the offense and what I think is going to be a really high scoring game here.
Yeah, Will Smith has obviously played pretty well recently, 7 points in his last 4 games. I don't mind a Mikael Granlund, Will Smith mini stack for all the money tonight just to go super different. But yeah, this looks like a pretty solid game stacking environment on a slate where I'm not sure how many games are like that. In terms of the power play tonight, the Capitals have been really good, 4th best power play in the last 10 games. Sharks have been okay on the kill, same with the Capitals, 15th and 14th best. Overall, the Capitals' 4th best power play advantage tonight, the Sharks with the 9th. Both teams do take a fair amount of penalties though, so that just kind of can fuel the fire in what looks like a pretty high scoring environment this evening. Game number 2, you've got the Florida Panthers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins have looked a little bit better defensively recently, but I don't know how much I'm buying into that. The Florida Panthers have, had their ups and their downs this year. They've had some absolutely outstanding performances. They've had some pretty disappointing performances. But you look at what the Penguins have done recently, right? Only 2 goals against in their last game against the Flames, only 1 goal against in the previous game against the Bruins. It's not like they're really turning a corner so much as I think that those 2 offenses just stink for the most part. We've talked about the Flames being a team that just really struggle on the road and are great on home ice. We'll talk about that a little bit later tonight as they return back to Calgary. So this looks like a spot in which I think the Florida Panthers can have a really, really good night. Obviously, the matchups across the board for the Florida Panthers look pretty good. The better matchup, you're basically splitting hairs, right? Like these matchups, the Penguins really have not been matching up at all. So just you can basically pretend that the Panthers, all four lines are pretty good in terms of their matchups, and then you just got to take a look at the stats. And the top line is by far the best option right now. That Verhaeghe Kachuk line, we keep waiting for them to get going. It's just really not happening. They've had some big performances, but like from a consistency basis, it's just not there at all right now. So that top line, Barkov, Reinhart, just absolutely humming. You can include Evan Rodriguez in there as well if you would like, but their offensive numbers really, really good. Matchups really, really good. You take a look here at the ownership for this one. Florida one really, seeing a decent chunk of ownership, nothing crazy though, 7%. Barkov at 10%, Reinhart at 7%. It's really something that I'm interested in getting well over the field on tonight. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really good game environment here. Obviously, the Florida Panthers look like the team here to target ideally. This top line, they have been hot as of late. Alexander Barkov, 4 goals, 8 assists in his last 10 games. Sam Reinhart, 7 goals, 4 assists over that time. Evan Rodriguez, not overly productive, 2 goals and a pair of apples too. This second line for the Panthers, it feels like they might be starting to come around just a little bit here. Again, all 3 of these guys in their last 10 games scoring over 8 points. So I think there's an opportunity here for both of these lines to have some success tonight. I am on Florida 1 in our daily face-off head-to-head. I'm usually a Florida 2 guy, but salary-wise, I was really able to get a nice Barkov mini stack with Evan Rodriguez in there. We'll take a look at that in a little bit here, but it does feel like a pretty solid game to target here. The matchup score obviously is not great for Pittsburgh 1. Where they really kind of have an advantage, though, is they fully correlate on the top power play unit, and the Pittsburgh Penguins have the best power play on the entire slate tonight, 7th ranked on the season, going up against an absolutely terrible Florida Panthers penalty kill. I think it's a really interesting way to try and get yourself a little bit different here tonight. Florida obviously seeing, as you mentioned, a little bit of ownership here tonight, but this does, again, feel like a fairly solid game environment, all things considering. Pace score 98.5. Don't mind to see that. Obviously, the matchup's a little bit rough here at 5-on-5 for Pittsburgh 1, but you know what? They've got other ways to produce offense here as well with the power play.
Yeah, obviously the offensive metrics here for Pittsburgh 1. We'll just get to a question here really quick in case anyone is new. Javier wants to know what's the difference between matchup score and the line scores. Pittsburgh 1 in particular is completely opposite. So the matchup score takes into account how much they're going to play against the opposition, each individual opposition line, and based on their defensive numbers. So the matchup is specifically looking at how good their matchup is against the other team. So if the other team has really bad defensive lines, their matchup score will be good. If the other team has really good defensive lines, their matchup score will be poor. And then, as you point out, Pittsburgh 1, obviously tough matchups because they're going up against a good Florida defense. But their offensive numbers is just their raw offensive numbers. And then that's just, they have to try to overcome a tough matchup, which I think they can do. That line's been pretty solid this year. These offensive numbers are obviously really, really strong. And as you mentioned, the power play looks like it's in a pretty decent spot this evening. Spencer Knight gets the start. That helps. He's been, solid, not great. The 231 goals against average is obviously elite. The Panthers are really, really good defensively. He's coming off a shutout. He's played, pretty well recently. It's just like they don't really give up a whole lot offensively or defensively, excuse me. Like he hasn't faced a ton of shots and hasn't had to be, outstanding really. Just be really steady back there. At 9-10, 9-11 save percentage is kind of all you need when you're backstopping the Florida Panthers. I'm sure they'd like to see a lot more out of that. Sergei Bobrovsky, similar numbers out of him. So I'm probably not on Pittsburgh too much tonight. I do think it's a reasonable game stacking environment on a slate where there's probably, again, not a whole lot of those. So I don't mind Pittsburgh 1. That's probably the only line I would consider from this side. But yeah, it is a way to get different tonight. The power play does look like it's in a pretty good spot. Just quickly looking at the Florida Panthers, as I mentioned, right? We saw them kind of go through a slump a couple weeks ago last week, and really, really good. They scored 5 against the Leafs. They scored 6 against the Hurricanes in back-to-back games, 6-3 and 6-0 against one of the best defensive teams in hockey. Now they run into a Penguins team that sucks defensively. The Panthers should definitely roll this evening. Feels like a really nice spot. Okay, third game, we've got the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders. If you didn't catch it this morning, it will be the Montreal Canadiens debut for Patrick Laine tonight. He's going to suit up on the second line with Kirby Dach and Juraj Slafkovsky. It's interesting to see, I'm just excited to see, Laine back on the ice. It's been a really tumultuous, calendar year for him. Haven't seen him play much hockey at all. Obviously stepped away last year for a period of time. And then obviously the gruesome injury in the preseason this year hampered his start to the season. So he comes in, he's $4,400. I'm not playing him tonight, but I'll be interested to see how he can, get back into things. And I hope he has a successful season. And hopefully we can play him in the future. But, he's really not played a whole lot of hockey in basically a calendar year. I think it'd be foolish to expect a lot or big things out of him right out of the gate tonight. Also, suiting up with two players, Kirby Dach and Slafkovsky, who have been a bit in the Martin St. Louis doghouse recently, not performing up to their expectations. So really not a game or a team or I guess a line that I'm interested in tonight. We've seen a little bit of better things out of Montreal 1 recently. These offensive numbers are really starting to flourish with Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki being reunited on that top line, Alex Newhook up there as well. The sample's about 85 minutes, if I recall correctly, and the numbers are really, really good. Now, tonight they do have a bit of a difficult matchup against an Islanders team that grades out pretty well defensively. Ilya Sorokin has had his ups and downs this season, but probably more good than bad. He's also, I'm sure you'll get to it in your historical numbers, a guy that's just dominated the Canadians in the past, just unbelievable numbers against them. So I don't know how much Montreal 1 I'm going to get to tonight. The general public not getting to them much as either, but given their offensive numbers recently, it does look like this could be a bit of a decent low-owned spot tonight. I'm more interested in the Islanders side of things tonight. You know me, probably going to the Islanders second line. That's usually where I end up. The top line's been okay as well. Overall, probably not super heavy on this game, though. How about you?
Yeah, I do tend to agree with you. I'm probably comfortable coming in a little bit under the field here on this Islanders side of things. They're just a team that I never seem to get them right. Like anytime I seem to play the Islanders second line, they can pop off, and then it's New York 1 going off that night. And same thing the other way too. I got a little bit of interest in this Montreal 1 line. Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, they seem to play their best hockey when they're together. Cole Caulfield's shot rate is starting to climb a little bit this season, which is a really good sign, up to 8.9 shots on goal per game in so far this season here. And offensively too, they're coming around here. Last 10 games played, Caulfield 6 goals, 5 assists, Nick Suzuki 5 goals and 6 assists. As you mentioned, Sorokin, he's been great against the Habs in the past. 5 games played, 4 wins, 1 shutout, 1.38 goals against average, 954 save percentage. At $7,900, he looks like a really solid goaltender play tonight. As somebody who's not drawing the most ownership on this slate. That being said, I don't mind the spot whatsoever here for Montreal 1. I'll probably have a little bit of exposure to Caulfield, Suzuki, maybe 5%. Pretty easy to get them into a 20 max at that number. I'll have a little bit of the Islanders mixed in here as well. Obviously, it's Sam Montembeault getting the start here, but he's also had some success against the Islanders in the past. 3 wins, 246 goals against average, and a 927 save percentage to boot.
Yeah, if you take a look at it here, the matchups favor New York 2 over New York 1. And then also, if you take a look at the projections in terms of the price tag and the projections for this evening, Nelson really, really sticks out as a strong value play. So does Bo Horvat and Anders Lee. So really, both that top 2 lines look like they're in a pretty good spot from both the standard charts and then also just kind of your standard projections. Sam Montembeault obviously had a pretty strong start to the season, been a little bit lackluster recently. If you kind of go back to the last month, he's at an 886 save percentage. So definitely a guy that's been giving up plenty of offense. And I do think that the Islanders can get there tonight. Again, they are seeing a decent amount of ownership tonight, 7 and 8% respectively. I'll probably end up coming in a little bit higher on New York 2. That's just the line I usually go to. But we've seen really good things from Horvat and Anders Lee. Simon Holmstrom's been chipping in lately as well. As I mentioned last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Cole Caulfield on my season-long podcast, and me and you talked about it, how at the start of the year, Cole Caulfield was unbelievable, and the shot volume was incredible, and you're like, this is exactly what you need to see. This is the breakout. Then all of a sudden, maybe it was because he was moved off the Nick Suzuki line. Maybe it was just his own individual play, but the shot volume cratered, and now it's bounced back to a very, very impressive number. Basically, since I talked about him as a guy you should buy low in season-long fantasy hockey, he's like, oh, just kidding. I'm still super good. 4 shots on goal per game in his last 4 games, scored 4 goals during that time as well. So as the shot volume goes, usually follows the goal production. If he can continue to fire the puck, I think he'll be in a really, really nice spot. Tonight, maybe not for me, but there's going to be matchups moving forward where I'm definitely going to be a lot more interested in Montreal 1. Carolina and Seattle. We just talked about Seattle just getting absolutely throttled by the San Jose Sharks last week, twice in a row. Really a team that's kind of hit the skids here, losing 8-4 and then 4-2 to the Sharks. Prior to that, they had a 5-2 loss to the Anaheim Ducks. So really, really ugly performance. How do you remedy that? Probably not playing the Carolina Hurricanes is probably not the way to do it. But it is worth mentioning. We just talked about how the Panthers scored back-to-back 6-goal games against the Hurricanes, so they've got issues of their own. But I feel a little bit more confident saying that I expect the Hurricanes to bounce back more than I expect the Seattle Kraken, just a much better hockey team. The top 6 have great matchups here for the Carolina Hurricanes tonight. You're going to see a lot of the Aho line going up against the third line of the Seattle Kraken. You're going to see a lot of the Svechnikov line going up against the second line of the Seattle Kraken. If you were unaware or don't know, the Carolina Hurricanes, went with some new look lines. Eric Robertson and Martin Necas move up from the second line to the top line with Sebastian Aho. Svechnikov, Roslovic move down with Jack Drury. This is a definitely new look top 6 for the Hurricanes. The matchups are really good. Looks like a spot where they can flourish. The offense numbers are still really, really good. They're not quite as elite as what we'd seen, maybe in with previous slates, like when the lines look a little bit different. But we know like the Svechnikov, Aho, Roslovic line has had just unbelievable numbers. But now spreading the wealth out a little bit is interesting. I'm particularly interested in an Aho Necas mini, right? Necas has really been one of the best players in the league this year. Aho has been really, really solid. That line is definitely one that I want to get in on tonight. But that being said, Carolina 2 looks like a really nice value option as well. 14,400. Jury's got some offensive chops. Roslovic has had a pretty solid year. And Svechnikov, $7,200 just is fine. This team is seeing no ownership tonight. And they look like they're in a really good spot.
Yeah, they absolutely do, man. I mean, I got some real interest in this Carolina side of things. First and foremost, it's going to be incredibly easy to get over the field on them because nobody is playing them whatsoever. So you're getting yourself a little bit different there. Carolina also has an incredibly good power play matchup here on this slate tonight. Third best power play in the league going up against a 26th ranked penalty kill. Second best matchup on the entire slate. So that seems like a fun way to kind of target this game. This second line seems really interesting. You gave him a nickname before we even saw him play together earlier today, the Jackov line, and I love it.
I like it just the way fits so perfectly. You got 2 Jacks, and then you've got Roslovic, and you got Svechnikov. It's the Jackov line. It's perfect,
bro.
I thought that was some of my best work, and it didn't get as much love as I was anticipating, but it is what it is. Sometimes you miss.
Well, you know what? I'll give you some love for it right now because I thought it was hilarious. I like the look of this line here. Obviously Svechnikov is an absolute beast. Taking 11.1 shots on goal per hour of ice time. What's really interesting is like he's getting so many quality looks. 1.7 expected goals, individual expected goals per hour versus only 1.1 actual goals per hour. So he's somebody I think that is due to get a little bit more offense coming his way here. And I mean, this looks like just a great spot here for the Carolina Hurricanes. And I think, maybe the public perception of the Seattle Kraken is that they're this team who really loves to play a slow game and kind of grind it out with their opponents and stuff like that, which I do agree for the most part is the case. There's a solid pace score in this game of 98.3, but you look at these numbers for Seattle, man. I mean, their top 6 offensively is absolutely atrocious. And for as much as, they might be able to limit some of the high danger looks and some of the scoring chances at a fairly okay clip, I mean, this Carolina team is just so high powered offensively. It feels like a game where they could kind of go out and score 4, 5, 6 goals pretty easily and really bust this slate open and no ownership whatsoever. I think this is a spot that I'm definitely going to be well over the field on tonight.
Yeah, in full agreement there. We've you speak about the power play. Really, really good power play matchup over the last 10 games. Third best power play up against the 26th ranked PK. And Shane Gostisbehere is also a guy who we played a ton earlier in the season. Then he went through a bit of a dry spell. I think he was pointless in about 5 consecutive games. And we've really started to see his game come back to life in the last month or so. 10 points in his last 10 games. So if you want to correlate on that top power play unit with Shane Gostisbehere, I think that's a good idea. You've got pieces of all 3 lines, which makes it a little bit difficult to target them. But to me, I don't think with the ownership, you need to get too creative, right? You probably just stack the top line, you stack the second line, you mix in pieces of Gostisbehere. If you want to full stack the power play, I think that's okay. I think they're in obviously a great spot. But this looks like a line that's definitely interesting tonight in a line or a lineup, that can get you, win you some big bucks tonight. If they're going to come in around 2% owned against a Kraken team that just got absolutely slaughtered by the Ducks, the Sharks, and the Sharks. I mean, it's tough. Any interest on the Seattle side of things? You said obviously the offensive metrics are terrible. Then you've got the top line going head to head with the Stahl line. I mean, you look at the defensive metrics here of Seattle 2 and 3, where Aho and Svechnikov are going to go up against. It's such a good spot. I can't believe the ownership. It's unreal. But I'm assuming you're not playing in Seattle.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you can maybe make a case to play their third line as kind of a punt cheap option here. $9,000 to full stack them. They graded as the 35th best line to target. Obviously, well down the list here, but they are, on paper at least, the best offensive line. You've got Eli Tolvanen, who's always got a little bit of volume in his shot. Bjorkstrand taking a lot of shots, 9 on goal per hour of ice time. I don't think I'm going to get there with Seattle 3, like maybe 5% if I need to find some really cheap options here. Could go with like a little mini stack of Shane Wright and Oliver Bjorkstrand, but it just feels like a really ugly spot here for the Kraken.
Yeah, it's been nice to see Shane Wright bounce back a little bit recently. He's had some strong performances. Again, on a 10-game slate, probably not where I'm going to end up. But yeah, like you obviously are going to need some cheap stacks to pair with these super expensive lines that we're going to get to in a few minutes, like Colorado 1. So they're not the worst shout. They do have a decent matchup. They're going to go head-to-head with that Aho line most of the night. That Aho line, while they have awesome offense numbers, they give up plenty defensively. Really the only line that gives up anything for the Hurricanes. So it's not the worst show ever. Kachekov's obviously played better recently. So like if Spencer Martin was getting the start again, I would feel a little bit better. But yeah, I think that, like you said, $9,000. You don't need a whole lot from them. And if you want to try to pair some of these cheap lines, we've already talked about a few that, with those really expensive lines, they're in an okay spot. Buffalo and Colorado, let's get to it now. The Avs, 3.5 implied total up against 2.8 in Buffalo tonight. The Sabres have really not done anything offensively recently. A meeting with the Avalanche, who have struggled a little bit to keep the puck out of their net so far this season, maybe is a spot to remedy that. But overall, still looks like just a great spot for Colorado 1. Lehkonen, McKinnon, and Rantanen together on that top line, coming in at 10% owned. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's really been the saving grace for the Sabres so far this season. But as a whole, this is a Sabres team that's been, okay, probably middle of the road defensively, not a team that really scares you defensively that you're like, okay, yeah, I'm not playing Colorado. I'm going to full fade Colorado 1 tonight. Because I do think Colorado 1 can definitely get there tonight. The matchup, basically going to see the entire top 6 of the Sabres this evening. Top 6 of the Sabres, slightly above average to slightly below average defensively, much as this entire team this season. So, with as good as Colorado 1 has been, definitely a matchup on which I think they can get there. The offensive numbers here, 39 scoring chances, 3.4 expected goals for per 60 is awesome. Only 2.5 goals for per 60 as well. So a line that's probably due for positive regression, which is pretty crazy to say because they've been very, very solid so far this season. So Colorado 1, definitely intriguing for me tonight. I also have a little bit of interest in Colorado 2. The offensive metrics basically just average the matchup. Is a little bit better. They're going to see a little bit more of the bottom 6 of the Sabres, which the bottom 6 of the Sabres grades out much worse defensively. The reason, obviously, you got Middlestad heading back to Buffalo, just the narrative there. But the price tag is just so affordable. You got Middlestad at 4,600. He's been really quiet recently. But then Nichushkin at 5,100, who's been really solid since returning to the lineup. Really, really good price tag on both of those guys, coming in with very limited ownership. The power play in this game, it's not great. The Avalanche power play has been struggling. The Sabres penalty kill has been pretty good. But the Sabres take a ton of penalties, and at the end of the day, this is not a Colorado power play that I expect to rank around 22nd for the majority of the season, right? It's probably going to be a top 5 unit when it's all said and done. They got plenty of weapons, and I do think, at their price tag, Middlestad and Nichushkin are not bad plays. I think, from a projection standpoint, they look okay. From a matchup standpoint, they look better than Colorado 1. But upside-wise, Colorado 1's obviously played, but I do think that Colorado 2 is in an interesting little value spot here tonight. How about you? Are you going more Colorado than Buffalo in this one?
Yeah, definitely going more Colorado than Buffalo in this one. You mentioned UPL. He has been solid so far this season. It feels like there's some cracks that have kind of started to show as of late here in him and the Sabres team as a whole. You take a look at Nathan McKinnon up there on Colorado 1, right? Goalless in his last 10 games. He's only got 7 goals so far this season in 25 games. He's not quite shooting the puck a whole lot. Granted, that's turning around a little bit here. In his last 3 games played, McKinnon has taken a total of 22 shots on goal, including a 10-shot performance against Vegas, the other week. So I've got a lot of interest here in Colorado 1. Nathan McKinnon is a guy who you are not going to be able to keep from scoring for a very long time. And at 10% ownership to full stack this line, I've got a ton of interest. yeah, they're going to cost you 24,100 here, but there's some interesting spots elsewhere on this slate that you can kind of get to find some salary relief. I think this is a really, really great play here tonight. I'm definitely going to be over the field on Colorado 1 as a whole. I've got some interest in Colorado 2 for all the reasons that you mentioned. Nichushkin, it feels like he's kind of starting to slowly get into a bit of a rhythm here so far this season. Casey Middlestad, revenge game narrative, anybody? I don't mind that whatsoever. No real interest in Nikolai Kovalenko. Granted, he did score against the Oilers on the weekend for some explicable reason. The only goal that Colorado scored on Saturday night. Tons of interest here in this Colorado side of things. And I actually think I've got some interest in Buffalo as well. Buffalo 2 grading out as the best line to target 21st overall in this slate, seeing 4.8% ownership. I think there's reason to have some interest here. They've got a solid matchup score here tonight on this slate. Their line sets have been solid. And again, it feels like, Dylan Cousins, like he's been too quiet to start this season here. It feels like at some point in time, he's got to start to find his way. And of course, we got to talk about Alexander Georgiev getting the start here. Just an absolute sieve this season in the crease. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for offense to come in this game here. It's really interesting too. If you look at the betting markets right now, over 6.5 goals in this game is sitting at even money right now. I definitely like the over in this spot here tonight.
Yeah, all those goals are coming from the Colorado side tonight, though. McKinnon, obviously, still tied for the league lead in assists. He's shooting 7.3%. He's a 10.5% shooter. 22 shots in your last 3 games. This is a guy that is about as competitive as it gets. He's not going to want to be sitting here 25 games in the season at 7 goals after scoring 50 last year. So, he's going to start scoring goals. He's already, been picking up assists at a crazy rate. Buffalo side of things, it's so hard. Like, I'm just starting to think that maybe Dylan Cousins just isn't very good. I've been kind of an apologist for him and expecting him to get better, but he scored 31 goals in 81 games in 2023. He has 23 goals in his last 103 games in the NHL. I just don't, I talked about him a couple weeks ago. He's been generating an incredible amount of high danger chances. He's still at 5 goals in 24 games. Maybe he's just not that good. That's just what it could boil down to. The top line in a bit of a tough spot. They've obviously been solid. Tage Thompson's their best player by a mile. But without seeing, I like that line a lot better when Peterka's up there. With Peterka on the second line, I'm not that interested. Zucker has a one-off at 3,400 top power play unit. I could probably get behind that, although that power play has been dog. The Sabres go up against a really bad penalty kill tonight. I just don't know if I'm going to get there. I on paper, I think it makes sense, but I just don't really see an avenue for it. And obviously the avenue is that Georgiev is bad, but he's been a little bit better, around a 900 save percentage since the middle of November. So you're playing some Buffalo?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have some exposure. I don't think I'm going to be going crazy here. Maybe 10% total for Buffalo. Again, for me, it's just the Georgiev thing, right? I mean, he's just nowhere near where he needs to be an NHL goaltender. I'm actually surprised they didn't give Scott Wedgwood the start here. I was kind of expecting that to be the case, considering they traded for him this weekend. I think there's going to be some offense coming from this Buffalo side in this game. I just not entirely sure where. Again, Tage Thompson, obviously up there on that top line. I think he's an interesting play tonight. Scoring a lot of goals, really good shot volume there. I think the one saving grace with Dylan Cousins is he's at least giving you a bit of a floor with his shot volume. 9.6 shots on goal per hour of ice time. I don't think it's a world-breaking play or anything like that, but I think there's enough reason to have some exposure here in a 20 max tonight, which is what I'm doing on this slate. I'm going to mix them in a little bit. Don't think I'm going to go too crazy, but I like the price point here. I really do. I mean, 12,200 for this second line. I don't think it's terrible whatsoever. Could be an interesting play tonight.
If you want some saving grace here from the Sabres side of things, Tage Thompson, since returning to the lineup, pointless in 3 games, but has 16 shots on goal in those 3 games. And Alex Tuch, meanwhile, has been on an absolute tear, 10 points in his last 9 games, 4 goals, 6 assists, 22 shots on goal, and a healthy number of blocks during that stretch as well. So want to get on some Buffalo 1, you think this is going to be a high-scoring game tonight. I think Buffalo 1, Buffalo 2, not in the worst spots. They're seeing not a whole lot of ownership. It's going to be pretty easy to get to them at 5%. Okay, Boston and Detroit. Boston, 3.5 implied total. Who would have saw that coming a couple of weeks ago? The offense has woken up a little bit. I still think that this is mostly just a low-scoring garbage game. I think that the only reason that you would probably have any interest in playing Boston tonight is just because the Red Wings have Ville Husso between the pipes, and he's just not looked like an NHL caliber goaltender so far this season. So, like, yeah, this top six is in a pretty good spot. We've seen Boston won, those offensive numbers we talked about being pretty ugly and early in the year. And then I said, like, they look a little bit better. I'm just not able to use their sample this year yet because it's so small. Now, full sample for this year, they've been really solid. Pastrnak, Zacha, Geeky look like the best play from the Boston side of things. Ville Husso, to his credit, has gone down to the AHL and performed much better. So we'll see what he looks like at the NHL level. 4-0 with a 1.58 goals against average, 944 save percentage in the AHL. Let's see what he can do against David Pastrnak and company tonight. Overall, probably not going to get too much of this game, but Boston won. Their offensive metrics have definitely started to pique my interest a little bit. Where do you land with this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm definitely interested in this Boston side of things, specifically that top line. David Pastrnak is David Pastrnak. There's not really a whole lot that you have to say about him. Just an incredible player, continuing to give you tons of shot volume every single game that he plays in. Pavel Zacha and Geeky both taking a fair number of shots, 7.2, 7.9 per hour of ice time. They're not really scoring a whole lot of goals or putting up a lot of assists or anything like that, but it does feel like a plus spot for them here. Boston won coming in, 7th best line to target on the entire slate tonight, 8% ownership. I think I'm comfortable meeting the field there at 10%. Get them into the mix a little bit here on this slate tonight. Again, Ville Husso, another goaltender who's really struggled so far this season. 3 starts, 818 save percentage, negative 4.5 goals saved above expected. It feels like a plus spot here for the Boston Bruins. I don't really think there's any reason to get to any of their other lines here. Boston 2, Elias Lindholm, he's a National Hockey League player who is not really doing a whole lot out there on the ice offensively. So I don't think there's any reason to get there. Maybe a little Marchand if you want to try and get a little bit different, but that doesn't even feel like the greatest of plays here as a whole. Probably going to stick to some Detroit 1 here on this game and pretty much fade everything else here.
Marchand continues to grade out really well from a metric standpoint, generating a lot of high-quality looks for this team. Hasn't necessarily resulted in much recently, just 3 goals, 1 assist in his last 9 games. But Zach has 3.0 shots per game over his last 6 games. Love to see that shot volume. He's got 4 points in 6 games during that time. 17 shots in the last 7 games for Morgan Geeky, shooting just 5.9%. So maybe some positive regression coming from him. And yeah, at 16,900, I think that they're in a good enough spot. We'll see if it's Ville Husso from the NHL or from the AHL, because, yeah, he's been 2 different goalies, but those are 2 completely different leagues, and it makes perfect sense. Okay, the power play tonight. The Boston Bruins power play been struggling, but the Red Wings penalty kill, one of the worst in the league. So maybe a spot for that Boston power play unit to get back on track. Meanwhile, the Red Wings power play is really the only thing they have going for them if they go up against the second best penalty kill over the last 10 games in the Boston Bruins. So without a whole lot going at 5v5 for the Detroit Red Wings, as you see here, these offensive metrics are awful. Then yeah, probably not a whole lot to write home about. The one line I will talk about from the Red Wings, and I talked about them a lot a couple weeks ago when they were together, and then they broke them up, and now they're back together, is Bergeron, Kasper, and Tarasenko. They have been performing pretty well. Tarasenko has looked especially sharp recently. $8,600, no ownership whatsoever. Again, we've listed about 3 or 4 lines that you can full stack with these $25,000 lines that are in okay spots. I'm probably, again, one lineup at this line, but they've been playing well enough to stack with those super expensive lines, and maybe you get lucky. Minnesota and Vancouver, 3.1 implied total for the Wild, 2.6 implied total for the Canucks. Another one of these games that doesn't look overly appealing. Both teams have been very, very solid defensively. Both teams have horrific offense or defensive matchups this evening. I should say offensive matchups, but Minnesota won, probably the only one that's really worth talking about. Their offensive metrics are outstanding. They grade out really, really well in this game. As a whole, they are the second best line overall. Really good 5v5 score thanks to their outstanding offensive numbers. Also, their outstanding usage. Expect to see 32% of the ice time. They fully correlate on the top power play unit, which grades out 12th tonight, so nothing really to write home about there. But yeah, Minnesota won, kind of in an interesting spot tonight. They are seeing about 5% ownership. They grade out well in the charts. They grade out well in the raw projections. Are you getting to Minnesota 1 tonight?
Yeah, I've got some interest here in this Minnesota one line. Again, feels like their ownership's a little bit lower than it should be. 5.7% to full stack them right now. I think that's a little bit too low. Again, the price tag is really, really high. As you mentioned, there's some really nice spots. They're just such a great trio of players, man. Like Kirill Kaprizov, he's been having a solid season. Matt Boldy, too, like 11.1 shots on goal per hour. Main reason I've got a lot of interest there is Kevin Lankinen has really had some struggles as of late. Since he gave up 7 goals against the Edmonton Oilers on November 9th, in his last 8 games since, 330 goals against average, 889 save percentage. He's got a 5-3 record in those games, but they have been really, really ugly. Feels like a nice spot here for the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, the Canucks have heated up a little bit as well too, right? DeBrusk specifically has been great. All of a sudden, I went from a guy that wasn't really doing a whole lot to a guy that's just on an absolute tear all of a sudden. Had a really, really good road trip on their 5-game road trip. First 5 games of this road trip, 7 goals in 5 games, including a hat trick against the Red Wings the other night. 9 points overall. So he's been heating up at a really, really affordable $4,600 price tag. Elias Pettersson also gets his old pal Brock Besser back up on that line. They're seeing 2%. Really, really bad matchup for them tonight. Obviously, they're going to see a ton of that Joel Eriksson line, which is awesome defensively. So probably not the best matchup for this Vancouver one line to have success tonight. But if they can continue to stay hot, obviously, at 2% ownership, that would be interesting. But again, not a game that I'm probably going to get to a ton outside of Minnesota 1. Winnipeg and St. Louis is a very interesting game tonight, and I don't really know what to do with it because let's just take a look here. Winnipeg shuffled their lines tonight. Brad Lambert, former first-round pick, is going to be making his season debut, second career NHL game. He's going to slot on that second line with Cole Perfetti and Gabe Vilardi. They're like average age of 22 years old. Really, really young line. Kyle Connor, Vlad Mestikov, Mark Scheifele moves to the wing on the top line. They used this line last year for about 80 minutes, 5v5. They were horrendous. These defensive metrics are appalling. And that makes St. Louis kind of interesting. You're going to see a lot of Adam Lowry going up against this top line of the Blues, so that probably doesn't affect them that much. They're going to be a tough play, but these depth pieces of the Blues are somewhat interesting. These offensive metrics, not great for the second line, okay for the third line, but like I'm probably not going to get to that third line. I don't know, man. St. Louis too kind of feels sneaky tonight. They are grading out with 2% ownership. You got Shen, Holloway, Kyrou at 13,100. They're super cheap. Holloway's been pretty solid. Shen's been pretty solid. Kyrou's been great. If they see a lot of that Scheifele line tonight, man, those defensive metrics are just disastrous. So I'm probably going to take some chances on them at 13,100. Not going to go crazy because, like, I don't want my whole night banking on St. Louis too, but I'm mixing them in for sure. I think they're in an interesting spot, and they're probably, them and St. Louis 3 are going to see a fair amount of Winnipeg 1 tonight. Where do you land with this game?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of interest in the St. Louis side of things as well here. I don't mind the idea of playing some St. Louis too. They grade out as the 29th best line to target, $13,100 to full stack them. Jordan Kyrou, obviously the most potent offensive player there. Dylan Holloway, though, coming in at 3K on DraftKings tonight. He's giving you a solid floor, 8.7 shots on goal per hour of ice time, 1.1 goals scored per hour of ice time. His offense is seeming to really start to flourish here in St. Louis, and it feels like a spot where you're going to get super different from the field again. Just a line that's seeing next to no ownership. They're cheap. Obviously, going up against Connor Hellebuck, always a bit of a tough task for any team, right? But that being said, we've seen some cracks in the armor as of late with the Winnipeg Jets as a whole. Hellebuck is staying strong through them, but in the same breath, you probably only need a goal, maybe 2 from St. Louis 2 to really kind of pay off for you here tonight on this slate. So I think they're an interesting pun play, interesting way to kind of get really different from the field here.
Sorry, I was muted. Winnipeg side of things, where do you go there? Like, these new lines are kind of shitty. Like, the offensive numbers of that line aren't very good. I'm interested. I was actually surprised that Brad Lambert was on the slate. Talented young offensive player with Perfetti and Vilardi. I think at 11,000, you could probably do worse than them as well. A decent value option, not going to be, again, hammering them in my lineups, but I think as a value option, they look okay. Winnipeg 1, that's just tough. It's just a tough look. So I would have liked to see the regular Winnipeg one stay together. I think that on the whole, this is probably a lower scoring game. St. Louis just not a team that's scoring a lot of goals. Even after the coaching change, they've been better defensively. But the goal scoring, it's been better. It's just not great still. Like 5 goals against Rangers, everyone scores against Rangers. 3 goals against the Devils, sure. 2 goals against Flyers, like that's just, you know what I mean? Like it's good. It's just like, but everyone scores against the Rangers. So, can they continue to stay hot on Jim Montgomery? Sure. The Jets have obviously cooled off quite a bit. So this game looks a little bit lower scoring. I think St. Louis 2 is a sneaky play. Probably not playing too much on the Winnipeg side of things. From a power play standpoint, pretty bad on both sides. Any final thoughts on this one?
I think Winnipeg 3 is another one of those really cheap punt plays that you can use tonight. $8,700 to full stack the 3 of them. I would include Nino Niederreiter in pretty much any stack that you're doing with Winnipeg 3. 1.5 goals per hour of ice time, 1.3 expected goals per hour of ice time. Solid shot volume, 8.5 per hour. I think they're another one of those cheap lines that you can kind of play tonight. Don't need a whole lot to get there, and it does feel like a decent enough spot for them.
Yeah, the metrics I'm looking at here in terms of like their last 10 games, all situations, the Jets, one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Hellebuck obviously covering up a lot of those warts. So yeah, if the Blues can kind of stay hot under Jim Montgomery, they look like they're in an intriguing spot. This evening, okay, you got the Flames and the Blue Jackets. This is going to be an emotional one. They're going to the Gaudreau family's there. They're going to be honoring Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau in this one. Emotions are going to be high. Also looks like a really fun game. We've seen these two meet up. We talked about it a lot. The Flames specifically are just a completely different team on the road and on home ice. They're better offensively at home. They're also, the big difference is they're considerably better defensively on the road. Most of that likely has to do with the fact that Michael Backlund is able to match up against the opposition's best on home ice and can really kind of take them out of the game. And that's obviously going to be the case tonight. You're going to have Backlund going head-to-head with that top line, that red-hot top line of Columbus 1. So it's going to be interesting to see if Columbus 1 can stay red-hot in such a difficult matchup. Then you've got the second line. It's like they're scoring at a crazy rate. Kent Johnson has a point in every game he's played in this season. It's wild. These offensive metrics are awful, though. Columbus, though, I feel like you have to kind of get to them tonight because they've been so good and they're coming in with no ownership. Meanwhile, the Flames are like by far and away one of the highest owned lines on the slate. Calgary 1, 10%. Calgary 2, 10%. And then Columbus 1 at 3%. Columbus 2 at 2%. So I feel like I want to get to the Columbus side of things here just because of the ownership of how good they've been. It's like, is Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov? Yes, their underlying metrics are outstanding. Are they this type of matchup-proof type line that can still overcome this Backlund line tonight? We will see. But I still think I'm going to get on Columbus 1 tonight just because of the ownership alone. It's not going to be a crazy amount, but it's not going to be hard to get over the field. On the flip side, I am interested in this Calgary side of things. The Blue Jackets, obviously, they aren't the same team on the road either. They've been giving up plenty of goals on the road. This top line gets put back together. They played together quite a bit last year. That is not the right team. We've got Huberdeau, Kadri, Pospisil, probably mostly just interested in Huberdeau and Kadri, even just Kadri as a one-off. We've got Columbus 2. They've been just unbelievable together. Sharon Govich providing really, really good shot volume. Coronado's been good. They've cooled off a little bit recently, but they're still only 11,800. It's chalky, but they still feel okay tonight. And then that's probably, I don't really have that much interest in Coleman and Zari. They look okay. If you want to get exposure to the Flames tonight and without the ownership, that third line looks solid. Coleman, we know what he can do. Zari's been really good this year, so they're in play too. I just don't like. It's so hard, right? These are one of those teams we talk about all the time. Like, where are the goals going to come from? It's going to be one from each line. Are you playing the Blue Jackets low ownership tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I am. I actually had Columbus 1 in my first build in my DFO head-to-head, pivoted off of them for Florida 1. So now I'm going to want to get to them in the rest of my 20 max because they're probably going to pop off. I think it's an interesting spot here as a whole for Columbus. Obviously, the matchup isn't great for that top line going up against the Backlund line. But man, Zach Werenski on the blue line, like 5 goals, 12 assists, 39 shots on goal, and 22 blocks in his last 10 games played. He is just playing out of his mind right now. Plays a lot with that Columbus 1 line. I think they're still going to be able to drive some offense, even though they're going up against that Backlund line. I think the ownership is far too low on this Columbus side of things, all things considering, and it's going to be pretty easy to get over the field. I've got interest in basically, Calgary 1, 2, 3, and Columbus 1 and 2. I'm probably going to have a fair amount of exposure to this game as a whole. It's got the highest pace score of the entire night, 101.4. And just given how little ownership is coming in on this Columbus side of things, I mean, man, it just feels like another one of these really low owned spots that we're liking on this slate here. The plus side, too, both power plays grayed out in positive spots here tonight. The Calgary Flames, 11th ranked power play on the season. Both teams' penalty kills have just been absolutely atrocious. And again, obviously, like the Columbus power play, nothing necessarily to write home about, ranked 20th, but again, it's a strong penalty kill matchup. You got Zach Werenski on the blue line there. I think this is a really, really interesting game here tonight.
Yeah, and Dan Vladar obviously getting the start. Not a world beater by any means. 891 save percentage in his last, 6 games. He's been really struggling as of lately. Merzlikins has obviously had his moments, but recently he's been giving up more than he's been stopping. That's for sure. Still winning a ton of games because this offense is insane. But his last 5 games, 872 save percentages, give up 19 goals in 5 games. So definitely a look of a game that could get high scoring. They obviously just met in Columbus a week ago. The score was 5-2, and I think it was the second line that dominated. No, Marchenko had a goal and 2 assists. Fantilli had 2 goals. Werenski, a goal and assist. He's been unbelievable. I have so many shares of him in season long, and I just absolutely love it. Okay. Final game of the night, Vegas and Zach's Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers are slight road favorites, 3.3 implied total, minus 125 favorites in Vegas tonight. Pretty good matchups across the board for the Edmonton Oilers tonight. Pretty bad matchups across the board for the Vegas Golden Knights, save for that second line of the Golden Knights. And that second line, man, I've been waiting for these 2 lines to start to see enough of a sample where we could use the full sample. And boy, Vegas 1 and 2 grade out really, really well. I can see why playing Vegas 1 wasn't really working for me. Vegas 2 wasn't really working for me. They're generating a crazy amount of chances. I was right. They were there. They have 1.2 goals for per 60. Pause regression should set in eventually. Mostly interested in Nick Wall and Tomas Hertl mini stack there. Seeing Dorofeyev back on the top line with Barbashev and Eichel is great. They're in a bit of a tougher spot, but they've been red hot. The Oilers, Stuart Skinner's been so-so this year. The Oilers, for the most part, haven't, they've done a better job recently keeping the puck out of their own net for sure. And you'll speak to that in a little bit more clarity. But I still think Vegas is in an okay spot tonight. This is obviously 2 teams that hate each other. Vegas obviously going to want to win this one and score a bunch of goals. Let's make you talk about Vegas for a second. Are you interested in this side of things?
Yeah, I think there's a reason to have some interest in the Vegas side of things. I mean, you look at that top line, they have been solid offensively so far this season, 3.8 goals for per hour of ice time. They're grading out as the 11th best line to target here on this slate tonight. It's a really low owned spot going up against, an Oilers team that, they've been good defensively this season. They've still had some issues though. And even in recent games, they have put the clamp down a little bit here, but I think it's an interesting enough spot for the Vegas Golden Knights. Definitely on the late slate, if you're playing that, good reason to have interest in Vegas here. The second line, I mean, you just take a look at those offensive numbers again, Brock. Like, you want to talk about a line that's due to probably score some goals. It's probably those guys, right? I've liked Nick Wall as a player for a long time now. I've used him as punt plays, especially on some late slates, and had some success with him. I think there's reason to have interest here in this Vegas side of things. There's also reason to have interest in this Edmonton side of things. I mean, they have been absolutely rolling right now. Historically, in the last 4 or 5 seasons here, October and November have not been kind to the Edmonton Oilers. And it really feels like it's December where things start to really turn around for this team. And if anybody's taken a look at their calendars lately, it is December 3rd. Get those Christmas presents going here, folks. It's coming around the corner. And so too is the game for the Edmonton Oilers. I think they're in a spot here that's really interesting tonight. These games have historically been fairly high scoring. Aiden Hill has struggled against the Oilers. Stuart Skinner has struggled against Vegas. Edmonton 1 is grading out as the best line from this side of things. 17th ranked line to target here tonight on this slate. Their offensive numbers are obviously a little different without Zach Hyman up there, but man, Connor McDavid is still Connor McDavid. I've got some interest in this Edmonton 2 line, though. Vasily Podkolzin, the offense is coming around for him in a big way. 3 goals in his last 3 games played. His salary has not changed whatsoever, only gone up like 100 or 200 bucks. You get exposure there with Leon Draisaitl to the Oilers' top power play unit. One stack that I've been building a lot of lately is McDavid, Draisaitl, Podkolzin. McDavid and Draisaitl still play about a third of their ice time together at 5-on-5. So kind of some interesting ways to kind of attack this Edmonton side of things if you're really looking to spend up on this slate tonight.
Yeah, obviously these samples aren't as pretty as we're used to seeing from the Edmonton Oilers side of things, but obviously, there's more value now. At least you can play Connor McDavid a little bit more cheap. You can play Leon Draisaitl way cheaper than you've ever been able to stack him up before. So, Kapanen's looked okay, right? He's capable of banging in wide open nets like we saw against the Avs the other night when McDavid just does crazy shit. So yeah, these offensive metrics don't jump off the page, but I think it's a good enough environment here. Obviously a Vegas team that struggled defensively. The main thing for the Oilers in terms of keeping the puck out of their net, and we'll get to it here, is the penalty kill. All of a sudden, the number 1 ranked penalty kill in the NHL over the last 10 games. They've been unbelievable in the PK after being literally horrendous to start the season. So things have turned around there. Both these teams do not draw a lot of penalties. Both these teams do not take a lot of penalties. So both these teams have the 2 worst power play advantages on the slate. But obviously, the Edmonton Oilers power play can be great. The Vegas penalty kill has been around league average, 11th best, slightly above league average. But yeah, I have interest in both sides of this game. I think mostly just because there's no ownership coming in on this side whatsoever. Outside of McDavid at 10%, there's no ownership in this game. So looks like you said, these are usually high-scoring games, and I think this one will probably follow suit in the game that I will be getting into tonight. Okay, let's get to some defensemen tonight. Let's start with the ownership because we're kind of crunched for time here. So we'll get to some ownership stuff here. Aaron Ekblad, still the number 1 power play quarterback for the Florida Panthers, $3,700. Not surprised there. He's been projecting as one of the highest owned defensemen pretty regularly recently. Jacob Chikrin still in the top power play unit for the Washington Capitals at $5,200. Pretty nice price tag there. Jared Spurgeon, top power play unit now for the Minnesota Wild at $4,200. Darnell Nurse pairs really nicely with that Edmonton 2 line you just spoke about. Chris Letang, 3,800, had a monster game. He had like 32 DraftKings points tonight, $3,800. Don't mind him. Dante Fabro's price is starting to increase, but he's still playing like 20 minutes a night. With Ruwenski, easy way to kind of pivot off Ruwenski and save some salary there, like him. Anybody really sticking out to you as a great value option? I already mentioned Goss's Bear, 4,400. I like that. Where are you looking tonight?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of interesting to see Ekblad continuing to get all of this ownership because it doesn't really feel like he does a whole lot out there on the ice. Yeah, he's going to chip in some assists here and there, but I think there's some other plays around him that look pretty appetizing. Chris Letang at 3,800, I think he was a solid shout there. Ryan Pulock still seeming to get a lot of ice time here too. Ivan Provorov, $3,500. Simon Edvinsson, $3,400. Just feels like these guys have some higher ceilings around that price point than Ekblad does. Vince Dunn grading out really well at $5,400. I think that's an interesting play here tonight too. Josh Morrissey, obviously love him on a fairly regular basis. Rasmus Sandin at $3K. That's a really interesting name there for me here tonight as well. A couple of interesting names out there. Shot block gods. Oh, you are ready to go. Rasmus Anderson, Mackenzie Weegar. They've looked really solid. David Savard and Brandon Carlo might be 2 of my favorite plays on this slate here tonight in terms of defensemen. Really cheap, blocking just an absolute boatload of shots on a regular basis.
Get to the goalies here. The top goalie of the night is Connor Hellebuck. No surprise there. 12% ownership. He's also the highest owned goalie on the slate at $8,200. Nice matchup with a fairly low-scoring Blues team. But again, we've talked about they're not as good defensively. He's just been covering up a lot of their warts, which could lead to plenty of shot volume for him. And if he does have another nice performance, then Hellebuck could be optimal tonight at $8,200. Logan Thompson at $8,500 against the Sharks. Pretty pricey. We talked about that game. Has a chance to be high scoring. I think he's an okay play. He's the highest implied win percentage on the slate, so that's obviously a good thing. But I'd rather play Logan Thompson at 8,500 than Dan Vladar at 8K. Probably not going to get to a ton of Spencer Knight, although I don't mind him at $7,800. I think I'd probably prefer Philip Gustafsson at $7,800, same price tag. So the ownership kind of agrees there, but both those guys seeing plenty of ownership tonight as well. In terms of cheap goalies that I like tonight, there's not a whole lot. I honestly, I'm probably an insane person, but I might take a shot on Ville Husso and just hope that the Bruins just continue to suck. But outside of that, I don't know. I don't really see the avenue here. Maybe Joel Hofer at $7,200 if the Jets new look lines don't work at all. outside of that, man, I think that Hofer is probably the only one that I would really go dumpster diving for tonight. How about you?
Yeah, I think that's fair. $7,200 doesn't look like a terrible play. Projected to see a good amount of volume. He's had success against Winnipeg. 1 win in 2 games, 2.12 goals against average. I don't mind Sam Montembeault at $7,500 here tonight either. Projected to see some shot volume. He's had some success in terms of playing against the Islanders in the past. 9 games played, only 3 wins, but a 927 save percentage, 246 goals against average. I don't mind that there whatsoever. I do think Hellebuck's an interesting play at $8,200. I'm really liking Philip Gustafson here tonight at 7,800. Projected to see a decent amount of shots here tonight as well. I'm not sold on the Vancouver Canucks here. Obviously, their top line has had some success, but I'm pretty much in agreement with you otherwise on these goaltenders tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to live in that high 7K range tonight. Sorokin, Spencer Knight, Gustafson, they're fairly chalky, all three of them, but that's probably where I'm going to live for the most part. And then Joel Hofer, kind of my pay down. So I'm usually a little bit different than the general public on goalies. But I usually suck at goalies. So maybe they're right and I'm wrong. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to live tonight. Those top 5 in terms of ownership are also kind of the guys that I feel the most comfortable with this evening. Okay, let's get to tonight's hat trick pick challenge. If you want to participate in today's hat trick pick challenge, you can do so by commenting your hat trick pick in the comment section of the video on YouTube, not the live chat below. And yeah, if your player scores a hat trick, which is a $25 gift card to nationgear.ca, pick up some DFO swag. I won yesterday's DFO head-to-head, so I will go first with my hat trick pick, and I'm going to go with Sam Reinhart. It's been just red hot. Really like Florida 1 tonight. I'm going to go Sam Reinhart. Who you got, Zach?
Nice. That's a really solid play there. I'm going with Andrei Svechnikov, 1/3 of the Jakov line. Mentioned it earlier. He's due for some positive goal regression. Let's see if that can come tonight against Seattle.
That's great. Okay. So yeah, we were obviously late to today's show. I didn't have time to put together the graphic today. So here's the look at our lineups tonight. Woo, sexy. Pretty simple stuff for me. I went with the full Washington 1 stack and the full Florida 1 stack. They grade out both inside my top 5 lines to target. They're both under like 18K. You can fit them together pretty easily. I went with that Ekblad correlation on the top power play unit. Ilya Sorokin between the pipes. Needed $2,500 defenseman. Jordan Oesterle's on the top pair against the Red Wings tonight. He's on the top pair with Charlie McAvoy. So he's been pretty solid, playing around 18, 19 minutes a night. Decent shot, decent block volume, for what his price tag. So there you go. That's my lineup. Zach, whoa, it's huge. Who you got?
Whoa, look at that. Yeah, pretty interesting one here for me. Wanted to get some Edmonton into the mix here. So on the very bottom, you got Leon Draisaitl down there with Vasily Podkolzin and Darnell Nurse. Some correlation at 5-on-5 there. Dylan Strome, Connor McMichael wanted that Washington 1. They look like they're in such a great spot. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I was able to fit some Florida 1 in here too. Barkov and Evan Rodriguez mini stack. Dante Fabro on the blue line, $3,300. He has been just awesome since joining the Blue Jackets, and went with an $8,200 Connor Hellebuck in the crease.
There you have it. We have over 1,100 people watching live right now across all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash that like button for Zach and I. Really helps, especially now that we're trying to grow a new channel. So smash the like button. Again, if you haven't already, if you're new to the new channel, subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting channel so you never miss an episode with Zach and I. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's been over an hour. We've got to go grind out some lineups now. And best of luck tonight. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow, hopefully 4 p.m. Eastern. Until then, hopefully you return with more money in your bankroll tomorrow than you had tonight. Until then, cheers.
Cheers.